Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Helmer. Today we're going to present a talk on positive lifestyles and healthcare, featuring diet and things that you can do in order to have a better and healthier life.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patricia Skergan, and you may be wondering, well, who are these people and why are they standing up here talking, and what sort of credentials do they have, what kind of experience do they have? Dr. Jim Helmer is a chiropractor here in Missoula, and he has done numerous guest lectures and topics and groups on health and alternative health care. My name is Patricia Skergan, like I had said, and I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition science from Penn State. And I've been working in the nutrition field for the past 22 years and have looked at diet and done research for different universities, and then went on to do chiropractic. And so I've been looking at the healthcare field for the past, like I said, 22 years, and have really kept a pulse on kept a finger on the pulse of different dietary and healthcare needs, and specifically alternative healthcare. So we have both taught at massage schools around the country, and have also done, like I said, guest lectures on diet and health and vitamins and herbs and chiropractic and bodywork, exercise, things like this. And so we're here today trying to, I guess, make the Missoula community more aware. I find that in Missoula, people are a lot more educated than they are in other parts of the country about healthcare and diet and exercise, but what I see is not an implementation of that. It's like they know what to do, but maybe they're just hesitant. Maybe you're just hesitant about changing. And we understand that change can be scary, and when you talk about changing your lifestyle and your diet, it can be very scary and very different. And people go, well, I changed once and I didn't like it and I'm not changing again. But we would like to kind of focus here on how you can make small changes in your life, and a lot of small changes might add up to a very broad spectrum change, and a change for the better. So we'd like to turn this over to Dr. Jim here, and he's going to be talking a bit about what prevention is.
I heard a story the other day, and it was about a highway patrolman, and he was on his way up to Sealy Lake, and he pulled a car over because the car didn't have a tail light. And he went up to the window of the car and he asked the person for his driver's license and his registration. And the guy said, I forgot my wallet at home, but I have my registration. And the highway patrolman said, I'm going to have to run you in because you could have looked at that. You could know the name on the registration. How can I be sure that's you? And the fellow said, listen, I'm really late. I'm going up to Sealy Lake to do an entertainment program. I'm a juggler, and I have all kinds of stuff, and I've got to go. And the policeman said, well, you're a juggler? He said, yeah, I have bowling pins and balls and chainsaws in the trunk and everything. And the highway patrolman said, well, if you really have chainsaws in the trunk and you can start them up and juggle them, then I'll have to take your word on it that this is your car, and I'll let you go. And so the fella gets out and he opens the trunk, and sure enough, there are chainsaws there. And he gets out 3 or 4 of these chainsaws and starts them up, and he's standing there juggling the chainsaws, and the highway patrolman is standing there watching him juggle the chainsaws. And a couple of old gentlemen come driving up over the rise, and they're on their way fishing. They have their fishing poles in the back of their old pickup, and they drive by this scene, and both of them kind of stare at this scene, and one looks at the other one and says, Harvey, those drunk driving tests are getting tougher every year. Anyway, I just thought it'd be nice to start out with something kind of humorous. We're on the topic of health, and health is often a serious topic, and so I wanted to start out on a less serious note. But talking about health prevention, what you can do for health, one ought to really understand what health is. And Dorland's Medical Dictionary defines health as not merely the absence of disease, but the meeting your optimum potential emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So health and healthcare, when we talk about health and healthcare, we're talking about a lot more than just being free from disease or not being sick. So understanding that is a big part in terms of coming to an understanding about what health is, or maximizing your health. So I'm going to start out along this line about kind of getting an idea about what health is by kind of defining, or at least separating, maybe would be a better way to say it, healing and curing. And so when we talk about healing and curing, they may initially seem like the same thing. But when you really start to think about it, healing is more like what I would call a process. Whereas curing, the act of curing, is more like an event. It's something that just happens. Okay? So, talking and thinking more about healing then, we start to think about healing in terms of that healing is something that comes from the inside. It's from the inside out. And talking or thinking about curing, it's most often something that comes from the outside in. It's something that you're given, something that affects a cure. I guess one might think of it as maybe a drug or something that you're taking for an infection. You take it, you don't have to, it comes from the outside. You don't have to do any work. There's no personal growth. Or any kind of effort on your part, any kind of learning experience that goes with it. Whereas when you have a healing, when something heals, there's almost always some kind of growth or personal involvement that occurs. So I'm going to write down personal growth. And so, again, like I was saying, the examples that one might use is when we're talking about curing, one might be sick with some kind of an infection. You may take some pills. They come from the outside. You have this event that goes on. It kills the bacteria, and you have some kind of a cure. And for healing, let's even take just the example of some little cut. You cut yourself, and it's not severe enough that you need to take antibiotics. You don't go to the hospital or get any stitches. But yet, the process of healing occurs. It's something that you do, your body does, from the inside out. And even on something as simple as a cut, it requires some personal effort or personal growth. If you cut your hand and you're using your hand, your body gives you some pain messages and tells you that that's a healing that's going on there, and you can't be doing this thing that you've been doing. You can't put together a big erector set or work in your garage, whatever it is. So anyway, in this sense, then we've kind of talked a little bit about healing and about curing and what they are. And so next we're going to then try to talk about what you can do in terms of health prevention. How can you stay healthy? How can you allow healing to work for you? So we're trying to speak about prevention, and to try to speak about prevention, we're going to try to understand what prevention is. And oftentimes when I ask people or patients what prevention is, they'll tell me, I'll ask a question possibly like, what was the last thing that you did for prevention? What was the last time you went to speak to a physician or a healer about prevention? And the most common responses that I get are from women. It could be that they went and had a mammogram, or that they went and had a pap smear. For men, the most common response is that they had their annual checkup, that they had some blood taken. So the common theme that's running through this is that the people that I speak to about prevention and what they're doing for prevention are telling me what they're doing in terms of early detection. And to clarify that, a pap smear or a mammogram is certainly nothing that you're doing for prevention. It's an early detection technique. It in itself is a dose of radiation, and it's certainly not preventative of anything. That doesn't mean that I don't consider the value of a mammogram, because I certainly do. It's a valuable tool to help detect the possibility of some disease that's there. It's It's early detection. And so when I start talking about this, then people start asking me, well, what is prevention then? What do you do for prevention? And so we have to start thinking about the kinds of things that you do for prevention. And certainly these tests could be prevention if whoever you're going for, if the doctor is providing some valuable counseling in terms of lifestyle change that will help you to be healthier in the future. And so I think that the first thing then that we have to think about in terms of health care or prevention is counseling. And certainly counseling, if it's followed up by some action by the person, is a valuable lifestyle preventative tool. And a person, a physician, even a salesman may tell you, I think that the air in your house is impure, and I think that it would be valuable for you to add an air filter in your home so that the air that you breathe throughout most of the time that you're home is better for you, is more healthy. It provides less particulate that gets into your lungs. And in the wintertime here in Missoula, that certainly can be a problem. And so that would be something that would be considered health prevention. And the same goes for water. Adding a water filter could be a preventative measure. Certainly the other day I was at a bank and I was talking to a banker, and this person had a bottle of Evian water, or a bottled water, sitting on their desk, and I said, I see that you drink bottled water. And the woman said to me, yes, you know, she said, I never used to, but a person was in here taking care of the plants, because we have our plants in the bank taken care of by a company. And she said, I saw the person pouring bottled water into the plant. And I couldn't help myself. I asked the person, I said, why are you using bottled water on that plant? And the person looked at me and said, well, you know, the plants just do a whole lot better on bottled water than they do tap water. And she said, I suddenly realized that I might do better on bottled water than tap water too. And so that's when I started bringing and drinking bottled water or filtered water at work here. And I think that that's a valuable idea, a valuable concept, and it certainly qualifies as health prevention. If you're drinking a more pure substance like water, you're taking that into your body. It certainly qualifies as a preventative measure. I think the next topic that needs to be discussed in terms of prevention is exercise and diet, and certainly exercise and diet are two of the most important things that we can do in terms of health prevention for ourselves and for our families. And I'm not going to dwell a lot on diet because Dr. Skergan is going to be talking extensively about diet and what you can do dietarily in just a few moments in the program. But I'll address exercise just briefly, and I'm not going to dwell on it either, because I think that by now almost everybody in America has an idea that exercise is important, and the media has stressed it enough that people are really aware of it in terms of a healthcare preventative measure. And certainly exercise is very important because it keeps us cardiovascularly fit, and that's important in terms of preventing things like heart disease, heart attack. But also it keeps our body strong and able to meet the challenges that we face every day in our normal life. And it's a stress reliever, so it helps to exercise, regular exercise and vigorous exercise helps us to relieve the stresses that seem to accumulate from our jobs and meeting the needs of our families and trying to meet the needs of our bosses and whatever else it is. Exercise is very important, and I think that it needs to be done regularly. Certainly 3 times a week is good enough for cardiovascular fitness, but in terms of exercising for health, one ought to exercise like 5 times a week for a half hour a day at least, in terms of keeping yourself ready to meet the challenges that you face every day. The next thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of prevention is chiropractic care. And chiropractic care is a valuable preventative tool. First off, chiropractic keeps you physically in a place where you're less apt to deteriorate. Your articulations and muscles are less apt to spasm and articulate. And I think this can be well thought of in terms of the wear and tear that goes on in daily life, and that has been described by others, other doctors, not necessarily myself, in terms of the process of what goes on with degenerative change or degenerative arthritis. And chiropractic keeps your body mobile, loose, and moving, and it can actually hold up the degenerative curve. So what happens is that over a lifetime, you tend to get more and more degeneration. So when you get down in this part of the curve, your joints are achy and you have arthritis because you have the degenerative change that has gone on. Well, using chiropractic regularly in your life helps keep this degenerative curve up for a longer period of time. It keeps your joints and articulations much more mobile. It keeps you much more able to meet the challenges of daily life, and it will keep you healthy for a much longer period of time. I think, secondly, the emerging studies seem to back the concept that chiropractic boosts your immune competence. And what I mean by that is that some initial studies have pointed to the idea that regular users of chiropractic care, people that go see chiropractors and have used them regularly, have a higher level of immune competence, or have a higher, I guess, level of immunity is a way to say it, than people who don't use chiropractic care. And certainly much higher level of immunity than people who are sick with some type of debilitating or chronic disease process. So chiropractic then is truly a health preventative tool. I don't know if it's always used that way, but it certainly can be used as a health preventative tool, much in the same way that it's used by a lot of people to relieve pain or discomfort with their musculoskeletal system. There are a couple of areas that I would consider as valuable preventative medicine, but because of our lack of time in the program, I'm not going to dwell on them or spend a lot of time on them. One of them is homeopathy. I consider that a preventative, that can certainly be used as a preventative health technique. I believe that massage is a preventative health technique as well. I think everybody knows a little bit about massage. It helps you to relieve stress, and it helps to take tension out of your musculoskeletal system. And I think for these two reasons, massage is an excellent health preventative medicine. And I think that the third one that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on is acupuncture. I think acupuncture is a valuable health preventative tool too. I think that it's difficult to talk about or think about acupuncture when we're thinking about our Western medicine, because it's based on an entirely different system. It's concerned with meridians of the body and the movement of energy and energy flow throughout the body, and so it can't be thought of in the same vein that we think about our Western medicine. But I think it is a valuable health preventative technique, and I support anyone's use or attempted use of acupuncture in terms of health prevention. The last thing that I really want to talk about today is the mind-body connection, or the connection of prayer and meditation, these types of things, with health care and health prevention. And I think that it's very valuable. They're a very valuable asset to anyone who's thinking about health prevention. I think that the other day I was reading studies about how there are research institutes and doctors who are working very hard right now to try to call or identify what they call the spontaneous remission in cases of cancer. And these are cases where the person's own body, through some thought process or whatever it is that they're using, actually finds a way to fight or remiss the cancer by itself. And there are many cases of this, and it's something that is poorly understood right now, but I think it will be very valuable in the future. Initially, these studies came out of some of the work that was done in 1970s, identifying the fact that you could accomplish things, you could control body processes that people thought you could not, that no one can gain control over. In the 70s, we started to realize you could. They did some basketball studies where people who were using imagery to shoot baskets could actually improve their basket shooting without ever touching a basketball. They could go in and do a control, and then they could come back a month later having just thought about shooting and thought about how it feels to shoot the ball and make it go through the hoop, and actually improve their basket shooting, and improve it almost as much as a group that actually went out and practiced basketball for a half hour or so a day. And I think that a couple of areas that these are being applied to today in medicine are the areas of biofeedback, and certainly that's a technique where you're learning to control areas of your body. You're getting into a meditative or an alpha brainwave state, and you're able to use this to help your body. And I think that anyone who doesn't address the area of taking some time daily and using meditation or prayer, depending upon their religion and thoughts on religious process in terms of trying to help their body to heal, to use this as a preventative health measure, to visualize themselves as being alive and totally well, I think that this is a valuable preventative tool that can be used in healthcare. I think now I'm going to stop talking about prevention, and I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Skergan, and we're going to let her talk to us about nutrition and other topics that she's chosen to present today.
Thanks, Dr. Jim. That was really interesting about the different concepts of healing versus curing, and what's prevention and what are some of the ideas about prevention. And one thing I thought was really interesting was the fact that there is a small percentage of people that have some sort of terminal illness or disease or chronic illness that simply do spontaneous remission. And this can't be explained. And I think that we should start looking at these people and find out, hey, what are they doing? In this is called the bell-shaped curve. And most of the scientific research is all based on this bell-shaped curve. And what this means is that here's a total population, and they kind of look at to see what happens. And most of the people will fall somewhere in the bigger part of the bell. Most people that get sick with a cold will heal up in a certain amount of time. Say this. And we can predict, okay, this will last between X amount of time. The people up here on this part of the curve, or the upper part of the curve, may never get well. They get the cold, it goes into pneumonia, and they die, or they get chronically ill with this. Okay? Some people on the other side of the bell curve may never get sick with a cold, or if they do, the symptoms are minimal. And we can take this and we can project it onto any kind of illness. We can project this onto cancer. A certain amount of people will get cancer, and we can predict what the outcome will be. Other people will, we cannot predict what their outcome will be, but their outcome will be worse than what we expect. And a certain amount of the people will heal spontaneously. They don't fit into anything, any category. So what I say is, let's study these people that get well quickly, do spontaneous remission. Let's study their life. Let's look at what they do and try to figure this out. There's a medical doctor, and his name is Deepak Chopra, and I'm sure many of you have heard about Dr. Chopra and his work. He did quantum healing, ageless body, timeless mind, or something like that, and he's done a lot of work with alternative healings and alternative medicine, and has really come into the forefront with this. Anyway, he says with this spontaneous healing is that the DNA, or the cells of the body, have a memory. And what you may or may not know is that your body is completely anew every 7 years. That means that the cells in your muscles and ligaments last about 2 years. Your red blood cells last about 120 days. The stomach lining, all the cells in your stomach lining only last 3 to 4 days. So in a chronic problem, what we have is that the DNA will lay down the cell anew as if it were still in that disease state. And he says somewhere in the spontaneous healing, we go into the unconscious or the superconscious, or out of our logical mind, and we go down into this arena or area, and this is where healing comes. It's like you have never cut yourself and said, gee, today I think I cut myself, so I'm going to do blood clotting. So let me think my way through this blood clotting. Or gee, I think I'm going to wake up today and do scab formation. Your body does this. It has an innate intelligence. And if we can give the body what it needs, it will heal itself. And self-healing and healing that comes from within is, I think, what we're talking about in this prevention and the healing versus the curing. For example, your liver secretes 500 different enzymes every single day. Now, you may not know this, and it's a good thing you don't, because what happens if you wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, yesterday I forgot to secrete enzyme number 438? You'd just die. So it's good that our body knows this. And it's good that we grant our body the honor and the space and all the good things that we can so that it can just heal itself and allow us to be healthy and joyful in our lives. Well, with that in mind, I'd like to talk about what we can do for prevention and healing with our diet. And of course, diet has been looked upon, for many, many years. But, it's only been in the last, 20, 25 years that people have actually stopped to take a look at their diet and really seen that, hey, what I eat can make a difference on how I feel, how I think, how my body functions, and how I function, and how I view my life. Do I walk around, oh, I'm so, bloated and hurting and achy and just down on life, not functioning at 100%? Or do I see the world as lighthearted and joyful? Do I see it as a friendly place or a fearful place? So, yes, diet can play a role in all of this. Now, there has been recently a sort of a marriage between the medical system and diet. But this is more or less what we would call a shotgun marriage. Like, most of the times the patients have come to the doctors and said, look, I've changed my diet, I've had the vitamins, I have taken these herbs, I have tried this alternative way, and yes, I'm doing better. And through this arena, they have come to understand and do much more research and look at how diet does play a role in the prevention of disease and also the healing of disease, certain disease states. Well, it all started back in 1974 when the U.S. Senate Select Committee, it was McGovern's Senate Select Committee, took a look at the dietary goals of the United States. Why would the government be playing a role in this? Well, because too many people were missing too much work, productivity was down, and there was a rise in what we now call the Western dietary-induced illnesses. Now, this is more or less the illnesses that are drugs and surgery really couldn't play a big role in, but prevention could cause an enormous healing factor in the prevention of these certain diets induced diseases. So anyway, the U.S. Senate Select Committee came up with some dietary goals for the United States. Again, this was 22 years ago, and this was in 1974, and this is when I started becoming more interested in diet and changing my diet and how my diet related to my world. Anyway, they had said that the current diet was that 42% of the calories that people were eating were coming from fat. And of these, a lot of them, or 16% of them, were coming from saturated fat. Now, saturated fat, as you may or may not know, is the type of fat that comes from animal products. Now, an animal product is anything that comes from an animal. So here we have milk, meat, cheese, eggs, yogurt, sour cream, ice cream, things like this. Anything that comes from an animal would then be saturated fat. Just to keep it simple, we'll say that. And then the other part of the diet was the percentage of fat was 26% unsaturated fat. This was what was being eaten then and is still being eaten today. And this would become from plant fats like peanuts and oils, corn oils, avocados, anything that comes from a non-animal source, okay, a vegetable source. They said that we're eating about 12% protein and about 46% of the calories were coming from carbohydrates. Now, there's two types of carbohydrates. One is what we would call complex carbohydrates, and these would be for your grains and your pastas, your breads, things like this. And then the other 24% were coming from simple sugars. Now, simple sugar is something that is made from the refined sugar or honey or barley malt, fructose, things like this. And not only are we talking about simple sugars, but we're talking about foods that have simple sugars in it. So where did we want to move from? We wanted to move from this 42% fat, 46% carbohydrates, 12% protein, into a diet that had 30% fat. So we have a decrease in the amount of fat. Not only a total decrease in the amount of fat, but the fat looks different, i.e. only 10% saturated fat. So what the Senate Select Committee was recommending that we do is really to reduce the amount of cholesterol, the amount of animal foods, the amount of red meat that we were eating, a whopping 6% here. 20% unsaturated fats. And one of the other biggest change that they wanted us to do was only to have 58% carbohydrates, which was a big increase from what we were having. But they wanted the composition, or what the carbohydrates that we were eating, what it looked like, to change. They really wanted a reduction in the simple sugars, okay, to only 15% of the simple sugars. And 40 to 50% of the carbohydrates that we were eating, they wanted in the form of whole grains and more complex carbohydrates. So this would mean more corn, more oats, more whole wheat, more whole grain rices, things like this. And a decrease in the things that had more simple sugars in it, like donuts and cakes and cookies and snack foods like this. So they really wanted to switch us around so that we would have less processed food, more fresh fruits, more fresh vegetables, more whole grains, less salt, less fat, less cholesterol, less sugar, and foods that contain sugar, and less meat. Well, even though these dietary goals were goals, 22 years later, we're still not at this. We're still not anywhere near this. In fact, when you talk to people that do grocery ordering for some of the multi-chains, they see that, the grocery stores, they see that the biggest ordering and the biggest sellers are still the sugary drinks and like the soft drinks and the snack foods. And the snack foods are high processed, okay, they're high in salt and they're high in fat. And they taste wonderful. Going down the mouth, yum, but what they do inside is not real good. At the turn of the century, the average person was taking in about 5 pounds of sugar per year. Today, the average American is taking in 120 pounds of sugar per year. Can you see that increase? 115 more pounds per year per person of sugar. The average American now eats approximately 60 pounds of fat per year. And I just happen to have what that would look like, because that would be 12 pounds or 5 pounds of fat per month. And I just happen to have what 5 pounds of fat would look like here. So we're going to go into that a little bit later. But I really want to drive this home about how switching your diet really makes a difference. And the amount of fat and the amount of complex carbohydrates and the amount of salt and cholesterol and sugar and meat, they have to decrease, and the amount of whole grains, fresh fruits and vegetables, and the amount of whole foods that we're eating has to change. Now again, in the beginning I said, you know, some people, when you say, look, you have to change your diet, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do, you have to start exercising, unless they're under the gun, so to speak, for like having a major heart attack or some kind of life-threatening disease, they're like, well, why should I change, you know? Again, I changed once and I didn't like it and I'm not doing it again. But what we try to say is making small changes. If you can make a small change. For example, one day, instead of driving through a fast food restaurant, bring your own lunch. And then the next couple weeks, increase it to 2 times a week. One night a week, just cook something differently. Try something different. Try a different recipe. Go get a low-fat vegetarian cookbook. Go to some of the Whole Foods markets that we have here in town. Browse through the store. Take your time. Read the labels. And don't be afraid to make mistakes with this all. when I started changing my diet, I made horrendous mistakes. I would make bean soups that tasted like, the beans tasted like little bullets. When people came over to my house for dinner, they always had to stop on the way to my house and pick something up to eat it before they came to dinner, because they never knew what they were going to get. They never knew if what I was going to make was edible or not. So you know you don't want to come to my house for dinner. But anyway, I have made a lot of mistakes making whole wheat cakes out of honey and maple syrup, and I mean they just weigh like 100 pounds, and oh, here, have some cake, you know, from making them from whole grain. So you make a lot of mistakes, but so what? And again, the food is, you know, this is not all the time, but if you could just start making a change and making a switch, you'll see a big difference. And if you can incorporate it, kind of sneak some foods in on your families, and you know, start making some things without sugar, sneaking some foods in that don't have sugar in them, sneak them in. And if they say, oh, yuck, this is really awful, I don't want to eat this, say, well, it's just not all the time, I'm just trying something new. Maybe make 1 or 2 meals a week like this. And pretty soon you start switching. And the taste buds start changing. And the people begin to really be able to taste the sweetness of an onion or the sweetness of a carrot. And pretty soon when you bombard them with one of these soft drinks that's nothing more than sugar and chemicals, they go, oh, you know, that tasted funny. So once you start retraining your taste buds so you're not so addicted to the high fat and you're not so addicted to the enormous amounts of salt in the food and the fat and the sugar, then you'll be able to really taste the foods. And you'll start feeling better. And you'll start functioning better. And life will be better. Okay, so as I said before, each American eats about 5 pounds of fat per month. And many Americans are in the weight loss, trying to lose weight, trying to get in better shape. And it's just interesting to see maybe what 5 pounds of fat looks like. I wish I had a nickel for every person that said, oh, if I could just lose 5 pounds. Well, I just happen to have what 5 pounds of fat looks like here today. And Jim, Dr. Helmer, not that he has 5 pounds of fat to lose, but, I would like for him to show us what that might look like. Okay, here, this is exactly what 5 pounds of fat looks like. And if you want to know what that is, if you have 5 pounds of dog food or cat food or a 5-pound laundry detergent, pick that up. And if you are trying to lose 5 pounds of weight, 5 pounds, and you're not exactly sure, you know, how much that is, why don't you put a backpack and put the 5 pounds of fat in the backpack and carry that around all day. Now, if you have 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds of extra weight, this is how much weight you're carrying around every day. And no wonder you're tired at the end of the day. If I had to carry this around for all day, and not only that, but I have to heat it, I have to cool it, I have to feed it, I have to get rid of the waste products of metabolism, I would be exhausted at the end of the day. And again, if we were going to cut you open and you had 5 pounds of extra fat, this is exactly what it would look like. It's a semi-solid liquid, or semi-solid. It's kind of modeled like this. It's not real smooth, but this is pretty much what it looks like. And this is a model. This is plastic. This is not really coming out of anybody or anything.
It speaks toward maintaining a good goal weight, doesn't it? It speaks toward wanting to be trim, having to think about carrying an extra 4 of these around all day.
Mm-hmm. Right. So many people have a misconception about fat and what foods are fatty and what foods aren't. So I have a list of foods here that I'd like to read to you, and I'd like to give you the percentage of calories that come from fat. For example, whole milk, about 53% of the calories come from fat. Cheese, about 68% of the calories come from fat. In beef, about 83% of the calories come from fat. In a hot dog, about 70% of the calories come from fat. Whole grain cereals, about 2